Hey guys, welcome to GearHeads. Today, we're showing you how to do front brakes on this 2007 Mustang GT. Now, front brakes are a very simple job, and this process is very applicable and similar on all kinds of different cars, especially front brakes. Rears also are very similar, but sometimes they're a little tricky. There's different things going on with the emergency brake, etc. But we're not doing that today. We're just doing the fronts. So, anything else to say?
Nope, let's get started.
Let's do it. Woo. All right, after you jack the car up and put it onto jack stands securely, go ahead and pull your wheels off. Now remember though, if you're not using an air gun like I am, make sure you break all your lugs loose while it's on the ground, because you're gonna have a hell of a time trying to take them off when the wheel's just gonna sit here and spin. And then you're gonna have to put the car back down. So, don't forget that. All right, now that the wheel's off, it's a good idea if you leave your key in the ignition, just one click forward. It doesn't have to be all the way on, but one click forward. On most cars, we'll leave the steering wheel unlocked, which means you can go ahead and pull this over, and now we can get better shot for the video for you guys, and I have more access to work on this. The first thing I'm gonna do is compress the caliper piston, and I like to do it while it's still mounted onto the hub, because when you do it this way, it's not moving around, you don't have to fight anything. So you just put the front side on the back of the brake pad in here, and then just find a good spot on the back side for the clamp to rest. And you can see, if you watch here, the brake pad's pushing farther away, and then if you watch in here, if you were to look down there, you can see the pistons are compressing in as well. So some cars you actually can't, depending on the design, you can't compress it all the way while it's mounted. Sometimes you have to do it when you pull it off. But I think on this car, I can do it all the way. Yeah, I might have to compress a little bit more once it's actually off, but at least that makes it easy to slip the caliper on and off. Because if you don't do that at all, then the caliper doesn't want to pull off the brake pads because it might be tight. All right, next we're going to go ahead and take the caliper off of the caliper bracket, which is this piece, and then this is the caliper. You can see it moves separately from the bracket now that we compressed it and gave it some play. And there is 2 bolts usually on most cars. There's one here, one down here. On this car it's a 12 millimeter, so let me see how tight that is. There we go. I broke it loose. Perfect. Let me do this one too. There we go. Cool. And now that they're cracked loose, I'm just going to pull them off the gun. Come on, baby. There we go. All right, now for now, just go ahead and set this somewhere. I'm just gonna set it up here for now because this line isn't long enough. Some cars it's long enough you can go set it on the arm or something. It's also not a bad idea if you want to zip tie it or use a bungee to hold it up, because you don't want to just leave it hanging by the weight of the brake line itself. That is not a great idea. And now actually we can get to the pads, pull them off, and you can see actually these things have a pretty good amount of life left in them. They're not gone yet, but they're squealing super loud. They've been doing that since we got the car. I think it's because these are ceramic pads, so they're more common to make noise like this. But anyways, you can see the bracket there and how much pad life's left. These I'd say are probably about 40% or so. Anyway, so next we're gonna go ahead and pull the bracket off. So on this car that is a 15 millimeter and it's pretty tight, so I'm gonna hold it on and hit it with a hammer. There we go. That one's loose. Let me get the lower one. There we go. There we are. It is off. And now you can remove your brake rotor. Now these are actually fine. They're thick enough, they're not scored up or anything like that, and they're not warped. So just keep in mind, if you're driving and you're getting a pulsation from the brakes, like a vibrating or shaking when you hit the brakes, maybe going downhill, or if you have to stomp on it kind of hard, that's because your rotors have warped, and it's a good idea to replace them. If you don't have to, they'll still work and still stop the car, but it's just going to get worse, and you don't want to keep driving like that. So like I said, I don't have that problem. I'm not actually replacing them. I'm only replacing the pads right now, and it's mostly just because the noise was getting so bad. So I'm just slip that back on, and then we've got the bracket here, and while that's off, we're going to pull these pins out and grease them up. Whoopsies. There went that one. So you can see actually there is a little bit of grease on there. That's good. This one looks kind of dry. So I'm gonna get a rag, I'm gonna wipe these off, and then we're gonna put some brake grease on these. All right, this part is very important. A lot of people just quickly slapping new pads on the car neglect to do this, but this is how you end up with warped brake rotors or your brakes wearing unevenly, because people a lot of times will not grease these up and then will stick. And then what happens when that caliper piston is squeezing on the brake pads, one side sticking and the other side sliding, and then it's wearing the brake pad unevenly because of that. And it also can cause the brakes to stick on, which can make your brakes wear out much faster and overheat them and cause the rotors to warp, and then you get that brake pulsation. So these actually did have a little bit of lube on them, which is good. If you pull these out and they're very difficult to get out, you might need, like if nobody ever greased them, you might need to even hit at it with a hammer, like a hammer and a chisel to get it out of there. I've had to do that before. I've had to use vice grips and spin and pull that out. But if that happens and it's all dusty and rusty and crappy in here, you might need to get like a metal brush and clean out the inside here. But these are fine, so I'm just going to wipe these off like I already did and put some lube on it. Oh man, this one didn't come with a brush. That's lame. Where's my brush that was supposed to be in here? And by the way, this is not just normal grease. You don't want to use petroleum-based normal grease with these, because that type of grease, first off, doesn't take the heat that the brakes cause, and secondly, that kind of grease will ruin the rubber seals on your caliper bracket. It causes the rubber to swell and ruins them. You don't want that either. So this is specifically brake grease. You can find it at any auto parts store. Okay, now that we got those taken care of, we can go ahead and put the caliper bracket back on. Let's just mount it up. Oopsies. It stole my tool. And just double check that they're tight by hand. That's nice and tight. That one's good. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and put the new brake pads in. I just got these from Napa. They're just normal brake pads. It says premium on them, but the truth is that's like the lowest. I think that's the lowest one. The ultra premium is the better one. Or they have some fleet ones too. Those are supposed to be like heavy duty, but this is fine. All right, so before I go ahead and put the brake pads in there, I'm actually going to add some of this brake lube to them, and there's a couple reasons for this. One, it will catch a lot of the dust and keep dust from building up, because that's one big thing that causes noise. And yeah, I don't have a brush, so I guess my finger. And then also, it's important to put it on the tips of the bracket where it's actually touching the caliper bracket. And that will also keep them from vibrating and shimmying, which is another cause for brake noise. So I know it's always a good idea to lube the ends here. Some people instead like to spray that, what is it, brake quiet, you know, anti-squeal stuff on the back. That works too. I like just using this. But you can do whatever you prefer. Make sure you don't get any actual lube on the pad itself. You don't want that. Or I'm gonna try and avoid that, like I just did, because the brush, they didn't give me a brush. There we go. All right. And same thing, we just lube up this other one real quick. Just make sure you're doing this on the back. Don't put lube on the brake pad. It is very unnecessary, and you will have problems. These have these weird things holding on them. Hooks. Yeah, these hooks. Okay, so now I'm ready to go ahead and put the caliper back on. Now make sure these pins are slid right. Every car's got a little bit different design. Some of these pins, it doesn't matter if they're turned or not. These ones actually have a flat spot that lines up with where it mounts, which will keep this from spinning when you screw into it. So, and I also mentioned before that I might need to compress the caliper more. I don't actually have to, it'll fit on there now, but if you did have to, the best way to do it is hold it like this, and since this is a 2-piston caliper, take your old brake pad and put it here, and then use the clamp on the old brake pad and then on the back side of the caliper, and that will compress both pistons down all the way. So you would do it like this. Just put your old brake pad on there, put your clamp on and squeeze it, and you'll be good to go. But this one actually compressed enough while it was mounted, so I don't need to worry about it. Here we go. Now the one challenging part about getting the caliper back on is you want to compress these also at the same time. There we go. And it should just slide on. Just remember when you're trying to put this on, you might have to physically pull back on those pins a little bit to make it fit. There we go. Just double check them. Good. Good. All right, turn it back straight so I can put the wheel on. And we're done. That is how you do a brake job. It's not very difficult. It's quite simple. It doesn't take very long either. It only took me, what, 10 minutes? It was nothing. So the other side's exactly the same, and I did want to mention a few things just because not all cars are exactly the same. Some things are a little different. For example, like on this car, the rotor just slides on and off. There's some cars actually that have screws that hold the rotor onto the hub, and if that's the case, those things are usually really tight, and if you want to get those off, you're going to want to buy or rent an impact screwdriver, which is basically you put that in there, you hit it with a hammer, it'll break them loose and spin it out, and then the rotor will lift off freely like this one did. What else? If you're changing the rotors, which we obviously didn't today, a lot of times they come with Cosmoline or different kinds of grease on them just to keep them from rusting, and it's a good idea to spray them off with brake cleaner before you put them in. I'm not worrying about it with these, so whatever, I don't know. That's pretty much it though. Let me get the wheel back on here.
Alright you guys, so as you can see, doing your own brakes is not really a hard job. It's going to save you a ton of money by getting your own brake pads. Even rotors, they can be a little bit expensive, but honestly, go to your local hardware store or auto parts store and see if you can get your rotors turned or get them cut. Typically they can file them down a little bit with a lathe and shave a little bit off so they're smooth again. But you don't want to get too thin, otherwise it could get dangerous and you run more chances of warping the rotor. But again, not a hard job, it saves you a lot of money.
You can measure your rotors. You need a small caliper measuring tool, and then usually the rotor actually has stamped on it somewhere the minimum thickness for when you can't cut it anymore or when it needs to be replaced. But also, I did not put new brake hardware, like the little brackets that go on the caliper. I don't know if somebody saw that. I don't always do that unless the old ones are falling out or they're bent up or something's wrong with them. Otherwise, just grease the side of the brake on the brake pad bracket where it's going to mount in there, and you'll be fine. It doesn't need it. So anyway, yeah, that's it. Brakes are easy. Not a big deal. Saves you money. Doesn't take a lot of time, and hopefully this thing's quiet now. Oh, one more thing I will mention. Do this. We didn't do it yet because the car's not on the ground yet. Pump your brake pedal up because you just compressed them. So if you go in the car and you go to put it in gear, it'll let you put it into reverse or drive or whatever because the brake pedal's pushed down, but you won't stop right away. You need to pump it a few times to get those pistons back out and get everything seated right. So we did not show that yet. Just make sure you do that.
And another thing.
Another one.
Also,
another one.
Make sure that when you compress your brake cylinders, the pistons, you can see the level of your brake fluid under the hood, because you don't want to overfill it. You don't want it to flow out if you filled it up because your brake fluid was getting low because it was pushed out into the pistons. But when it is back up, when your pistons are fully compressed, you want to make sure that that brake fluid level is refilled.
Excuse me. That's all. You got it.
Thanks for watching, guys. If you guys have any questions about your brakes, drop them in the comments below. We'll be more than happy to answer them. And don't forget, keep wrenching.